Hi everybody, welcome once again to Out of the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. I'm Robert Taylor coming to you on WMTV, and if you frequently view the show, you know we bring you guests who are expert in the metaphysical realm, the healing arts, and the creative arts. And I'm writing solo today, I'm all on my own. And we have a special guest who has been on the show many times. He's a celebrated author. He's written over 20 books on spirituality, and it gives us great pleasure to welcome Stephen Knapp back to the show. Stephen.
Thanks so much, Robert. Glad to be here again.
And you're always a fountain of knowledge.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
And we thought, this week we'll show people as we're talking some of the publications that you've worked on.
Sure.
How many is it now? How many books do we have?
22 books, and if they go to my website, I've got like 10 free ebooks they can download or read online if they want. Plus, my website itself has like over 150, I think almost 200 articles now. Sometimes I lose track.
Wow.
A lot of information, pictures, travel scenarios, slides from India, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff people can use on there.
So you're really, you're across the web. You are worldwide. You were telling me a little bit before the show, most of your work is based on the knowledge of the Vedas from India. And you get lots and lots of Indian people from India hitting your website.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I get 4,000 unique visitors every day on my website. Plus I've got a few blogs. I've got 60 videos on YouTube, lectures and travel videos, so you can take your pick. And, almost 5,000 friends on Facebook. I think I'm going to have to create another identity. They only let you have 5,000 for free, and then you got to start, But anyway,
wow.
A lot of stuff people can find out and learn, even whether they go to India or not.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do, is make it as a resource that people can use as much as possible for their own benefit and for their own upliftment.
So all your works are available, Kindle, the Nook, ebook.
Yeah. And of course Amazon. Amazon, of course, is the main outlet. If you're not on Amazon, you're just nobody.
You are in the book world. Yeah.
In the book world.
Yeah. They control and own everything, it seems. Yeah.
Well, I have to admit, Amazon's been very good to me, so I can't complain too much.
And you were telling me about that too, that they now have a program where they will print on demand. They have
it's just their publishing or printing aspect, which is called CreateSpace, and a lot of authors are starting to use that because it's very advantageous. Amazon owns it, and there's a lot of benefits that can come with it if you're looking to get something out there with limited funds and without spending a whole lot of time looking for a commercial publisher, especially if you're in the spiritual field, because if you're not already established some way, in a big way, in the spiritual field, then it's very difficult to find, new publishing companies or new companies that'll take a new author to begin with. In fact, I had some talks about that with a friend of mine, David Frawley, and he also had told me a long time ago that, if you're in the spiritual field or metaphysical field itself, it's hard to get a good publisher.
Yeah.
There's a lot of small publishers out there. It's just like India. It's easy to get a book published in India, but to have a publisher with a good distribution network, very difficult to find.
Yeah.
So, with the expansion of Amazon and everything, then I found that this is a very good outlet to do.
And David Frawley, like you, is a very accomplished, very well-known author in your field.
Yeah. He's been very accommodating to me as well. In fact, Hinduism Today, their recent issue, just came out with a review of one of my other books called Crimes Against India and the Need to Protect the Ancient Vedic Tradition, which David Frawley himself had reviewed, and they used some paragraphs from him on that.
Fantastic.
So it's good to network with other people and, people in similar situations that can always lend a hand or give some advice or help you out.
Well, I'm thinking, with 22 books under your belt, you could do a whole speaking tour on how to publish a book.
I probably could. If any people are that interested, or if they need to know, then sure. I could help out.
One of your recent books, I don't know how far back it is, but The Soul, Understanding Our Real Identity. So maybe we could start out.
Yeah, that one just came out about a year ago, and this was a book, because sometimes the books I do, as like this one here, The Heart of Hinduism, a friend of mine once said, some of your books are like 3 books in one. You buy one book and it's like all this material, all this knowledge, all this research, and so I thought, well, looking at a book like this can be a little intimidating for some people.
Yeah, it's a big,
650 pages. So I thought, let me come out with a smaller book with some real core essential information and knowledge on, the spiritual identity, understanding our real identity as a soul, or the key to spiritual awakening. So this is only like maybe 100 pages of in-depth and essential reading that a person can do, which helps us understand exactly what is our real identity as a spiritual being. Because the fact of the matter is, if you don't know who or what you are, then essentially you don't know exactly what to do with yourself.
Absolutely.
Or you certainly won't know how to be fulfilled and feel complete in your life.
Yeah.
Because as the world, we can see it today, the world is so much filled with pollution or corruption, politics or whatever. And the core, the essence, the seed of all that pollution is simply a misguided aim of life. And that misguided aim of life comes from nothing more than a misunderstanding of who and what we really are as a spirit soul within this body. Otherwise, if you think that you're this body, you think the whole goal of life is to pamper the mind and the senses as much as possible, as if that's going to bring you all the happiness that you can achieve. The fact of the matter is, many people who get caught up in that lifestyle, you look at them, and even then, they are not living necessarily a balanced life. Like, so many rock stars, movie stars, all these people like this. How many people?
TV.
That's a good example. How many of them are really living a balanced life?
I remember catching an episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and this little girl was having 4 years old, having a birthday party, and cut the long story short, all the little girls who came got like a $4,000 Barbie ring, each. But throughout the whole thing, it was an elaborate event, amazing, Mother paid like $60,000 for the party, and this is a 4-year-old. And she told the child's father before, do not buy her a puppy. So she's looking totally miserable through the birthday, and then at the end, Daddy arrives with this big box. Out jumps a puppy. So she's walking away from the event, and Mommy asks, well, what was your favorite thing? The puppy.
Sure. Naturally, that's because kids relate on an emotional level. Whether it's some, doctored, procedure that they go through or whatever, it's like how, basically, that kind of thing only prepares them for asking for more and more and bigger and bigger.
Exactly.
It doesn't simplify things, because the whole purpose of life really is simple living but high thinking.
Yeah.
Which implies then that if you're filling your life up with so many complexities to pamper your mind and senses and fill yourself up with, all kinds of contraptions and things that will stimulate yourself for either entertainment or sensually or whatever, it means that you cannot think on a high level or a spiritual level because you're so preoccupied with all the complexities, all the arrangements that you're trying to make just to feel stimulated and happy.
Absolutely.
Or it's like that saying, it's soda pop pleasure. As long as I got some soda pop on my tongue, then I feel there's some pleasure, some happiness. And once the soda pop stops, then, oh man, I got to get some more soda pop. I got to get some more money. I got to feed that habit.
Yeah.
And whatever other habit you got, that's what it comes down to. It's like in India, if you travel around, sometimes they say, a Westerner does not know what to do with an empty room.
Ooh.
Which also means that a person doesn't know how to sit peacefully.
Yeah.
You don't know how to deal with an empty mind, so to speak. You don't even know how to reach an empty mind. You don't know how to be able, because an empty mind means to be receptive to higher understanding, to higher reasoning, to higher perceptions. Because it's like they say, prayer is to petition God with whatever it is you want, or to give them your worries, your concerns. But meditation, emptying the mind, is to listen for the answer.
I like that.
And if you can't listen for the answer, how will you ever know whether you're guided from within, or just listening to the dictations of the constant conversation that we always have with our mind?
Well, you did got to say, I mean, we're both now, we've been around for a while in the world.
Yeah, how long is that going on for?
And what I've observed, even in the last 10 years, the amount of distractions that now our kids are.
It's increasing.
It's incredible. Right on their iPhone, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. We have all these modern conveniences, but the fact of the matter is that they're actually becoming more and more distractions on a continual basis. And I read about that. I read editorials sometimes where, somebody was writing an editorial that Facebook ruined my life, or some such thing like that, because you can't stay away from it. Always checking your messages, who's doing this, who's doing that, it's like, wait a minute. A few years ago we weren't doing this. 10 years ago we weren't doing this, and now we can't live without it? That's called an artificial necessity. And the more you depend on artificial necessities, the more you become vulnerable to artificial crises.
Wow.
That is the whole situation that's happening now. Without your, your iPhone or whatever, you can't function. Oh, wait a minute. Who are you kidding? Let's get back to living a little more simply so that we can think a little more highly, a little more spiritually, and actually get that perception of who and what we really are as spiritual beings in a material body, because this is all temporary. Everything we've got is all temporary. Here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or shortly thereafter.
So how would you define the soul?
The soul.
Yeah.
The soul is that part of which is the center of all consciousness, the center of all life, because sometimes it's said that the heart is the seat of the soul.
Yeah.
In other words, the energy that the heart has is also because of the presence of the soul. There's two kinds of bodies, basically. Beyond species, beyond sex, beyond age, beyond all those differences in the body we have. There's two kinds of bodies. One is a body that is alive, and a body that is dead and deteriorating. What is the difference? One is that the soul is in one, the other one the soul has left. The soul is that part of life that is the seat of life. It is the seat of our identity. We travel from body to body as a spirit soul. And then we enter into this body, and this lifetime is like a classroom where we learn certain things, it sticks with us, and we move on. But the more spiritual we become, the point of it is, the human life especially is able to give us the facility to actually perceive our spiritual identity. We can talk about it here, and I'm sure there's some people that's watching this thinking that you and I are completely nuts. But the fact of the matter is,
there's no such thing as the soul.
But the fact of the matter is, the Eastern philosophy itself, which is why I always relate back to the Eastern philosophy, it gives us more information on determining the soul, what it is, but it also gives you the systems by which you can actually perceive who and what you really are. So that instead of thinking that you are this body or you are these eyes, you begin to understand that you're only looking through these eyes.
Like a vehicle.
You're like in a car, exactly.
Yeah.
You're the driver of the car. You're the driver of this body. But the soul itself is that particle, spiritual particle, which means non-material, that spiritual particle which does not participate in the typical pattern of events in this world, which is birth, death, old age, and disease, or birth, growth, maintenance, producing some byproducts, dwindling, and then dying and disappearing. Yeah. The soul does not participate in all that because it's beyond all that. It is part of the supreme soul. So we have a relationship. So in this human life, our main purpose is to understand how we're the spiritual being within this body, what happens after death, where we might go after death, and what is our relationship with or between the Jivatma, or our soul, individual soul, and the supreme soul, or the Paramatma.
Yeah.
So this is the whole point of yoga. This is the whole point of any religion, quite honestly. This is the whole point of the teachings of Jesus. This is the whole point of any religion that you have. But for me, it is elaborated more clearly and more distinctly within the Vedic religion, which is what I've used. And I'll just read you one verse, for example. This is on, of course, this book has many quotes and verses in it.
Right.
But this is from the Chandogya Upanishad, for example. And it says, the self which is free from sin, free from old age, from death and grief, from even hunger and thirst, which desires nothing but what it ought to desire, and imagines nothing but what it ought to imagine, that is what we must search out. That is what we must try to understand. He who has searched out that self and understands it obtains all worlds and fulfills all desires.
Wow.
So in other words, once you understand that, once you realize your spiritual essence, your real identity as a spiritual being, then basically you've already accomplished anything else that you can accomplish in any other life, because that is the real goal of human existence.
Yeah.
Rather than just working to eat and sleep and, work up the corporate ladder and surround yourself with family and friends. And so one who has searched out that obtains also all worlds, meaning you've already attained anything that this world or any other world can ever give you within this material cosmic creation.
I like that famous quote from somebody we know very well, that if you have $100,000 in your bank account, you don't have to worry about your $5 or $6 problems.
Right, exactly. And that's what understanding your spiritual identity is. It's like having $1 million. All your $10 problems, your $10 desires, they become meaningless. It's like having a diamond after you've been working to attain so many broken pieces of glass.
Exactly.
Now you've got what really matters.
But it seems our culture today is really about distracting us from that process.
And it's getting more and more that way all the time.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more difficult to be spiritual. It's becoming more difficult to think about those things because, like I said, the more complex you make your existence, the more those complexities keep you focused on your bodily situation and how to surround yourself with more and more prizes and heights to maintain and positions or whatever, or as they say, the complexity of survival.
Yeah.
Just the problem of trying to survive in
has become much.
The world today is becoming much more ingrained and the topic of focus for most people.
Yeah, I think particularly here in the United States, it's been quite a big wake-up call after the big crash, even after 9/11, just for people to maintain their mundane existence has become a major struggle.
Right. Because I always say everybody should go to a third world country because when you come back to America, you can really appreciate things a lot more.
Yeah.
But now I think that even if you haven't gone to a third world country, the Western world is changing so much that you're beginning to see how things have changed in the past 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, especially for you and I. We talk about that so that we can appreciate sometimes the things that we no longer have that we used to have, or the ways the world used to be.
So easy.
That used to be much simpler, much easier to get things done and to, accomplish things. And now, college graduates are still living with their parents because they can't make it on the outside.
I've just been saying to people, in the late 60s, right in the late 60s, I went up to train as a fashion buyer with Harrods, going to college at the same time.
Yeah.
I lived in London, very nice part of London with 4 other guys in an apartment, but I was in South Kensington, going out to the pub and, going out to different entertainments. I lived in London, £15 a week.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's about $30.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. You could live, now, go out and try to buy a meal for that.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a decent meal for, without costing you $20, $30.
Yeah.
And then if you take your family out on an evening, oh man, if you got 2 kids and a wife or something, you're looking at, like a dinner and an outing, whether it's to an amusement park, movie, or a museum or something, you're looking like almost $100 right there.
So you're saying that a lot of our social ills are simply from this misconcept of, not realizing that we are all souls.
Exactly. It's a misdirected aim of life. And that, like I said, is the seed of all pollution and all corruption in the world that we see today. Because what is most of the pollution we have in the world, whether it's environmental, whether it's in politics or economics, it's all based on wanting more and more of that which is actually very ephemeral or very temporary.
Yeah.
It's, like I say, here today, gone tomorrow. The point of it is you want something of relevance. Now, what's relevant? If you think you're this body, you will continue to work for that which is temporary. But if you know the soul, if you know that your identity is spiritual, then you will act in a way that those things that are relevant to you are more on the spiritual level, not simply on the material or sensual level.
So how do you start out? You need to be obviously philosophically convinced. So you get Stephen Knapp's book here off Amazon.com. So that's one thing I like about Eastern philosophy is that it's not just a belief. It's not that they're just asking you to blindly have faith in something. You have to be, first of all, obviously philosophically convinced.
And the only way you can be convinced is what? Through your own personal perception, which means your own personal level of self-realization. And that's another thing. It's not just the knowledge, but it's the path. It's like, the knowledge is like seeing through spectacles of, Shastri quotes, verses that give you that in wisdom. But in the end, if you practice, whether it's meditation or chanting, japa yoga or mantra yoga, things like that, you begin to cleanse the mind of all the complexities so that you begin to actually see through the eyes of Shastra or through the eyes of spiritual knowledge. Because if I take off my glasses, everything's a little blurry.
Yeah.
Now it's clear. If you want to know the truth, if you want to begin to understand the reality, the true meaning of this existence, then you have to begin to seeing through the eyes of that spiritual wisdom. And then you can begin to see how, this is true, that's true. That said this, and now I can see it. It's right there. It's plain and obvious what that means.
So we're actually talking about spiritual realization.
Realization.
Not just some kind of
direct perception.
Yeah.
It's not just dogma. That's the difference. It's not just a religious dogma that you have to believe in whether you understand it or not. You start in a way, and from a level that is best for you. And then you continue to work your way up through different forms of meditation, yoga, study, so that you can begin to see yourself for what you really are as a spiritual being. And then you get the direct perception of who and what you actually are. And then you can work on that level of reality.
So also at that point, you're not only seeing yourself as a spiritual being, you're seeing all living beings.
Exactly.
In that light, as being one and the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what is the nature of the soul? To love and be loved. What is simpler than that? But that's the essence. Because we're all crying for love, or we're all wanting to express love in some way or another. And, that comes from the nature of the soul.
Yeah.
And the supreme lover, of course, is the Supreme Spirit.
Yeah.
If you want to feel complete, if you want to feel whole and balanced, then you also have to have a relationship with the complete, with the whole, which means the relationship between the soul and the super soul, or the jiva soul and God, needs to also be considered as an important aspect of your spiritual development. It's not like he's just some being with a long gray beard sitting on a chair somewhere telling, okay, this person goes to hell, that person goes to heaven, and, how much fun is there in that after 5 minutes? It's like, wait a minute, there's something more going on here that we need to realize that we may not always be exposed to through, conventional forms of religion or philosophy. We have to go deeper than that. And that's one thing I've always appreciated about the Vedic culture. It goes very deep, it's very elaborate, and it explains exactly what the nature of the soul is and how you can perceive it, how you can realize it, and then live according to that level. And because ultimately the whole goal of human life is to what? Is to eventually become spiritual enough where you no longer need to continue being born in another material body again and again and again.
Wow.
Whether you go to heaven or hell, all that becomes obliterated once you become spiritualized in your consciousness so that you can actually go back and enter fully and completely into the spiritual atmosphere.
I think that's a great way to end the show. So once again, we've been with Stephen Knapp, author of 22 books. And the book that we have been discussing is called The Soul, Understanding Our Real Identity, The Key to Spiritual Awakening. But if you go on Amazon.com, you can check out Stephen's books, or you go to YouTube, Stephen Knapp, go on his Facebook. You can get all sorts of great stuff you can see right on the internet and experience this. And ultimately, maybe you could give us a quote to go out with about the soul.
About the soul, certainly. There's many to choose from. Let me just pick one real carefully here. This is from Bhagavad Gita. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception only, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. The person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, meaning material happiness and distress, and is steady in both by attaining spiritual consciousness, is certainly eligible for liberation into the spiritual world.
Ooh, that's fantastic. Once again, Stephen.
Sure.
Thanks again.
Glad to be here.
And you are local. And if anybody wants to also have Stephen come along and give a talk, he's also available for those. And check out his books. He's a very popular guy out there. We'd like to thank all of you for joining us on Out of the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. Don't forget, God is alive. Magic is afoot.